much. I would like to walk you very quickly through 30 years of journey in rural development. And I'll focus on the theme that you see there, which is reducing poverty, raising incomes, and building resilience to climate change in rural India. Currently, we are working in 8 states where we have a physical presence, but in the last few years, we have been working in altogether 10 states in India. We began with Maharashtra, where the bulk of our projects are, and then we have expanded elsewhere. In about 10 states, 75 districts, and 7,255 villages. We work in 3 sectors of development. One is implementation on the ground, the other one is capacity building and training, skilling, and third is research and policy advocacy. Now, there's a reason behind why we work in this trifecta, as it were, because we believe that unless you do something on the ground, you don't have anything that you can prove or talk about. But having done that, and if it works, then you should upscale it and see that it spreads. So the purpose of replication and upscaling is core to the way we view rural development. But to do that, you need then to enter capacity building and training so that what works is spread and others can do it besides you. And if you really want to upscale it countrywide, given that the problems are so huge in our country and so widespread, then you need to work closely with government and those who have the resources to be able to take what works on the ground and scale it across the country, which means collaboration with government, public sector institutions, and institutions of national importance. For that, you have to have evidence. You need to have data. You must have proof of concept, which has worked at a reasonable scale on the ground. So that's why research and policy advocacy is also core to our functioning. So that these are the 3 pillars of the way we do interventions in rural development. Some of the scale and impact over the last 30 years, we've touched about the lives of about 8 million people, have helped treat and treated about 4 million hectares of land, supported and built up the capacities of about 21,500 women self-help groups involving about 250,000 women, trained about 760,000 people, and established about 72 farmer-producer organizations. Why do we do what we do? Because this is the challenge facing India. We work only in rain-fed India. We do not work at present in canal-irrigated areas. So we work in water-stressed areas, where rainfall is patchy, uncertain, and now in the context of climate change, even unpredictable. And 70% of our country is characterized as rain-fed. 80% of our landmass is at risk from degradation, from climate change and overexploitation and change in land use. And of this 70%, 30% is degraded, which means we are facing a huge challenge. 600 million people in our country are facing high water stress, and by 2030 is expected or anticipated that we will run out of water. That means the demand for water will exceed by twice over what is available. And that's, for a country like ours, terribly challenging and scary. If things go on in the normal way, business as usual, then it's expected that by 2050, India's GDP will be reduced by 6% due to water scarcity and shortage. The implications are enormous for us, and so are the stakes. Over the last 30 years, the cost of the losses and damages due to climate change has cost us about $3.6 trillion. Now that's quite a storm of problems that we have to face. And keeping this context and framework in mind, the areas we work in, we focus on land and water management. So when we talk of land and water management, we mean 4 things. One is integrated watershed development, water stewardship, water governance, ecosystems, and biodiversity conservation. Allied to this are the various aspects that you can see there, which is climate resilient agriculture. You know that 58% of our population depends on agriculture. And so it's vital that we deal with that. And so the components in that are we focus on enhancing agriculture productivity, improving soil health, water efficient agriculture, agrometrology. So we are also into the service of providing dynamic crop weather advisories to farmers on their apps customized to the crop and the farm. And then we do farmer trainings and link up farmers to the markets. Women's empowerment, the various aspects, SHG, drudgery reduction, the normal things that all of us know. But more important for us is that we empower them both in the household as well as in the decision-making processes of villages. Health, sanitation, nutrition. You know, malnutrition is quite a challenge in our country still now. And so we also focus on how we can use local foods and train people to cook in a way and to produce nutritious food which is locally available for their children. Besides this, I had also mentioned we're into research and policy advocacy, so we have set up the Water Center for Resilience Studies. This is basically an applied research, transdisciplinary think tank that works in the following areas that you can see there with a focus on ecosystem-based adaptation, economics, climate-resilient agriculture, water stewardship, socio-economic impacts, as well as women empowerment. So these are the sectors we work in. We've got a group of about 30 scientists working in with various disciplines and competencies, and that's some of the knowledge and research products that we have produced. The goal is, of course, to take evidence of what works to policy and decision makers so that what works on the ground can be upscaled across the country. Accompanying this is a capacity building and training program to equip practitioners, development practitioners, and implementers to implement these insights and practices on the ground. There's a theory of change. The why we do what we do is based on the understanding that since people in rural areas depend on the environment, then unless we regenerate the landscapes in the environment they live in, we will not be able to produce the productive base. We will not be able to enhance or create the productive base for them to live and to make their livelihoods. So regenerating landscapes, ecosystems, and watersheds is key to the way we work. Water, without that, there's no agriculture, no livelihoods, and no life. So it's increasing and augmenting supplies, using it efficiently and equitably is also at the heart of the way we do things. Improving agriculture productivity and creating farm-based livelihoods, empowering women, strengthening health, nutrition, sanitation, as well as local governance institutions is very important for sustaining the works we do. We adopt a system dynamics approach because in reality everything is interconnected. And you cannot solve one problem without addressing all the loops and the causal loops and impacts that arise from a single event happening. Take this for instance there. You see, if you want to focus on soil health, which is at the middle of the picture, impacting soil health is climate change. It's also the way land is, at the bottom side there is the land use and land change. That also impacts whether you can at all improve soil health and will also determine how you do it. The way we do agriculture, the availability or non-availability of water, all these aspects have to be considered in order to just solve one issue, that of improving soil health. So you need to have a systems dynamic approach, and you need to approach a thing in an integrated and holistic manner. So this is basically our journey from 1992 to 2014. We focused on regenerating environments, or what you call watersheds. Then we moved to climate change adaptation. We overlaid it over watershed development. We didn't move out of it. We simply added another layer of intervention. Then when water was available, the issue of using it efficiently and productively arose, and so we went into water stewardship and water governance. And today, we've added another layer which also brings together the earlier layers within the framework of what we call ecosystem-based adaptation. These are snapshots of what we have done over the years. I will not spend time explaining this. All of you are familiar with it. But basically, it means regenerating environments, catching rainwater wherever it falls, forcing it underground, storing it on the surface, making it walk so that it doesn't take the soil along with it. And these are the various measures that we have adopted to do this. But at the heart of it all is people, it's the community. It's they who hold the agency in the project. It's they who plan, who implement, who decide what to do, because they ultimately have to maintain and manage the assets in the post-project period. So we believe that with responsibility, and these are all aspects of responsibility, you need to give authority. We were the first program in India at that time where financial foreign development aid from Germany went directly to the people in the villages through NABARD. At that time, you must keep in mind that this was a revolutionary thought. 30 years ago, the Gram Panchayat's turnover was not more than 5 to 20,000 rupees per year. Those simple villages, inverted commas, simple, they were handling as much as 20 lakhs to 30 lakhs per year implementing these projects on the ground. And in that sense, I must compliment NABARD for this, for taking at that time, and it's a government institution, we must keep that in mind, for being so forward-sighted and having the courage to, in a way, to grab the bit and run with the tide. It was truly revolutionary what happened then. Today, it's common stance. Today, many of the development funds from the government, from private agencies, go directly to villages. Not at that time. And this was because Father Bacher always said that unless with responsibility you give people authority, which means handling money and holding them accountable to transparency and to giving accounts to villagers and the stakeholders, you will never really have sustainable development. It's adults who can maintain and develop sustainability, not children. And we don't give money to children, we give it to adults. So unless you give money to people, trust them, train them, set up accountability systems and transparencies, you will never really have sustainability in the post-project period. Most of our projects that we did then, 15, 20 years after closure, are still delivering the services and impacts that they had given at the time of closure. That's because it's the people who have an ownership and a stake in these assets and in these projects. These are aspects of what we do in the area of water governance and water management. I'll share with you an anecdote. At one time when we began in the Ahmednagar district, there was no water. And then when we did the watershed projects, there was so much water that people started using it as if they never had scarcity before. So sugarcane started being growing of all places when they had no drinking water. Within 5 to 10 years, they were back to square one. The assets were there. They still worked. But the water was never enough. It never is enough when you really don't use a thing responsibly. And so we were back to square one. Then we realized that unless we start talking about demand-side management of water, how we use it, even before you even have the water, you will never be able to put in place those systems of use, of frugality, and of governance when you have the water. So it was counterintuitive, because I remember when we first went to the village and said you have to use water prudently, they said, but we can't manage what we don't have, which made sense. And now what works really is it's counterintuitive. You got to already plan to manage what you will have, because that's where you want to get anyway. And that was a lesson we had. It took many years to learn, but I think the country is also facing that problem. And we have to take this lesson to heart. We need to, India is one of the few countries in the world which is blessed with an abundance of water. And yet, every summer, vast stretches of our country has no water. So obviously the fault is not of supply, the fault is of management, the way we govern our water. And that is the next frontier for India's development, India's development scenario, because without water, there's no life and no development either. Agriculture. 83% of freshwater resources in this country and worldwide is consumed by agriculture. So that's something that we need to wrap our heads around. But the interesting part of agriculture is you cannot bring about change there without involving farming communities. And I don't mean only farmers, I mean they and their families and the communities they live in. Because agriculture is so embedded, not only in the environment, but also in the life space and the way a community lives, that unless you look at and address it as a societal issue, you will not be able to really bring about sustainable agriculture which produces nutritious food, yet within the planetary boundaries of resource management. And that's the big challenge wherein we need to move into using technology, but also on the side of nature. If technology replaces and destroys nature, there won't be a base on which to stand on for all of us. So it has to be using knowledge, the best that human science can provide, as well as technology to bring about a transformation that will not only feed 10 billion people going forward, but also help preserve the earth for ourselves and for our children in the future. These are the various aspects of the livelihoods we help people to undertake, both farm and non-farm, many of them micro-enterprises. And now we have moved into moving large volumes of crops and farm produce to the market through farmer-producer organization. Health, sanitation, nutrition, you have seen all this. I'll share with you, for those of you who have not been able to go and see our projects, this is a village in Sangamne Taluka. The rainfall is about 250 millimeters to about 450 millimeters per year. Semi-arid, near desert conditions. You could see that in 1996. Look at that cactus down below. That's when we began work. That's how it looked in 1999. That's how it looked today, in 2024. Which only proves the point that when people come together and share a vision and evolve a consensus to do something about the barrenscapes you saw, they not only transform their environment, but also their lives and their futures. Father Bacher would always say that there is no such thing as a barren land. If it is, it reflects the mindscape and the social situation of the people living in that. You change that, you transform a society. You change a people's landscape, mindscape, and you transform the landscape. We cannot be dissociated from nature, from where we have come. And if we want to march ahead, we also have to ensure that we don't cut the tree on which we are standing. Because nature revived enthuses a community, strengthens local relationships, and builds local economies. The impact in the last 30 years at a very meta level is, in these areas we have found an increase in area under cropping, which has increased 3 times. So the area in triple cropping has risen by 121%. Farm incomes have spiraled to more than 2 to 4 times. And the benefit cost ratio, and this is something very interesting, ranges from 2.28, so 2.5%, 2.225 to 3.76, 2 to 4 times is the benefit cost ratio. And the internal rate of return is about 22%. We did a number of studies. Now, the important thing about this is, what it basically tells us is, if I invest 1 rupee in development, in this integrated approach, the benefits range from 2 to 3 to 4 times more to the people. And the internal rate of return is even better than industrial investments. At 22%, it's massive. But more important, from the human side, it increases the availability of water. You can't put a price onto that. Reduce the hunger and malnutrition and indebtedness. You must keep in mind that in the old days at least, the rate of interest given by the money lender was 60% to 120% per annum. When the people started this work and got money in their pockets through wages as well as later from productivity gains in the farm, the first thing they did was retire their debts. Next thing they did was send their children to school, invested surplus monies in health and education. This is what leads to the transformation that you see. And you can't put a price on this because the impacts of that is long-term, deeply transformational and societal and society changing. And migration. All these villages we were working in the past, before we worked, would migrate for 6 months in the year. There was nothing there to live on. Today, not only has it stopped, those who left have come back, and in some of these villages, the work is so much that they have to import labor during that time. So it's a case of poetic justice. It's, it's a case of reverse migration. As I talked about of upscaling, when you do work with partners, we have mentioned some of them now, with government, NABARD, etc., the impacts can be not only structural but also national. The impact of the Indo-German Watershed Program led to the Government of India setting up at NABARD the Watershed Development Fund. When the Germans gave us the money, that was 30 years ago, they made a condition. They said, we'll give you this to prove a point, but at the end of the day, for us, it won't be the success of these projects that we expect. That's why we're giving you the money. But for us, the metrics will be, if the Government of India puts in its own, or the state government or whatever, the national fund should go into replicating such a program and scaling it across the country. That, for us, is the talisman of success. In 1999, during the NDA one time, Mr. Yashwant Sinha, we were invited, both NABARD, the chairman at that time, who is now no more, Mr. Y.C. Nanda, and myself, we had this pre-budget consultations in agriculture, and Mr. Yashwant Sinha was sitting there. And at that time there was a drought. And there was also at that time this wind of going nationalistic and putting in self-dependence. So when our time came to speak, we said, you know, Mr. Sinha, there's only one way to address the challenge of agriculture drought that we are facing, and that's to do watershed development. We proved it. There's the Indo-German watershed program. So he said, yeah, I heard about it, but what do you guys want? So I said, money. So he laughed. He says, I said, listen, Mr. Sinha, I said, why do we need to depend on foreign money when we know what works and when we have the means to do so? You must keep in mind at that time there was this Swadeshi movement that was insisting on self-dependence. So we said, here's the opportunity. The Germans have given the money to prove a point. We've proved it. Now put in the money to upscale it. And he says, yeah, that's a good idea. In the next budget speech of 1999, he announced the setting up of the the Watershed Development Fund at NABARD, with the idea to take this program to 100 districts in the country at that time. That fund at NABARD has now grown to over 3,000 crores. The Germans gave us something like about 300 crores at that time, to 3,000 crores till now, and still ongoing. NABARD is working now with NGOs in about 19 states, and I think the total area treated to date is about 3 million hectares. In 2015, before that, we had moved into climate change adaptation, and again with NABARD and the Swiss Development Corporation, we had developed over 6 to 8 years a whole approach on how to take a rural village with doing watershed work, because that's the base, and how to make it climate resilient and adaptive. The success of that resulted again in a pre-budget consultation in 2015, in NDA 2 when Mr. Arun Jaitley was the finance minister, and Yashwant Sinha's son, that is Jayant Sinha, he was now the Minister of State. So we were again there with NABARD and water, and we raised the issues, you know, Mr. Yashwant Sinha, I said, Jayant Sinha, your father sitting in that place at that time set up the National Watershed Development Fund. But whatever we have done to date, we are not able to benefit from the impact to the extent desired because of climate change. So you need to address that elephant in the room. So could you please set up a fund like what you did then, give it to NABARD, and we'll spread it across the country. He set up the fund. It was taken, of course, by the Ministry of Environment and Forests. That's the National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change. And that's today, was set up in 2015 in the budget speech, and it is supporting projects, I think, till now about 800 crores plus across the country. So the point I'm trying to make here is, when you work with government, when you work with partners, not only with government, but partners, you can create a movement that can help upscale what works on the ground. We have, as Mr. Basak said, we have an agreement with the government of Maharashtra to help, to support them in developing a policy for climate change adaptation, for also promoting climate resilient agriculture, which is also nature friendly. And we have got here also Mr. Dr. Abhijit Godpade, who heads the State Climate Cell, and also with regard to water management. In the months ahead, a number of announcements we hope will be made in this regard. Our plan going forward, Mr. Basak alluded to some of it, but we intend expanding definitely to 10 states, to about 8,400 villages, impacting about 1+ million households. And we'll work in the area of ecosystem-based adaptation, community, keeping the community at the center, and we'll work on different types of landscapes and geographies. I'll spare you the goals because it simply means doing more of what we have done and better. WCRES also has its own plan and agenda for the next 5 years, and that's to increase the output of knowledge products, both written as well as audiovisual, and closer interaction with national institutions, both private, public, as well as with government agencies. Thank you. But before I conclude, I must say a big thank you to our donors. None of this would have been possible, even with all the ideas we have, if you didn't hold our hands and enable us to really do it. So I must thank all our donors, NABARD, the government of Maharashtra, the government of India, the German government, the Swiss, many more I cannot mention. Some of you are here, many are not here. Some have been in the past, some are current. To all of you, a big thank you.